Finding purpose can be the most challenging journey in life. Many people, especially men, will expend a great amount of resources to achieve it. But is it necessary? Or is there a better path? And how does this fit with reparations? On this episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, I explore what one can learn from the other. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, especially thank you for giving me your time so early. All right. So let's get to it. You know what I think I'm going to do is I think on Wednesday mornings, I'm just going to have my random dad musings. I think that's going to be a good opportunity just to kind of grab different things and discuss whatever, right? Like, so it won't be a bill review necessarily. It'll be like things that I've seen when I'm out there scrolling through social media and I'll have some sort of comment to make. So I think that's what I'm going to do from now on. You have to let me know whether you like it. Like, drop a comment in there and say, yeah, this is great. Or, like maybe, whatever, whatever your thoughts are. I want to hear them. So let me know, folks. But that's what I'm going to do for now. And today it's going to, like you can go back and you can look at last Wednesday. I had random dad musings, and then I'm going to do. I did. Goodness, I'm going to get tongue tied. I'm going to do it again today, and I'm going to try to do my best to make sure that it's interesting. Um, so what do we got for today? Well, there was an interesting video that I came across yesterday on social media. It's and I'm going to show it to you. It's of these men who are there's apparently something called the modern day night. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of videos here. I've actually got several videos. One of them is rather long, and I debated on whether or not to show it because it's like 10 minutes long. And I'm like, man, but I think it's a good video. And it's very informative and it will help, I think, in the discussion on this modern day night video that I came across on social media, on Twitter. So let me pull up let me go ahead and pull up this modern day night. Where did you go here? So about there we go. All right. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring this up here. Is that gonna work? I think it's gonna work. All right. So this came from somebody. His name is Hunter Weiss, and he said men are paying $18,000 to be mentally and physically abused. Laughing emoji, spiritually fried. All right. So let's play this video and let's see what he's talking about here. So let's go big on this. Make sure that we've got it. Yeah, there we go. All right, and let's play this clip.
Start climbing. Stop moving. I'm pulling you back down again. Back to on the freaking ground. Stop moving, and I'm going to pull you down the hill. Quit. If you stop moving, you're coming back down the hill. The dirt. Be helping you. Stop moving again. Start climbing. Stop
All
moving.
right.
I'm pulling you.
All right, so that's the end of that video. Okay, so this is something called the modern day night. And what it is, they literally do pay $18,000. I looked it up on their website. And so what happens is men will sign up for this particular project or this particular event, and it's like a 75-hour event. And then after that, it's kind of like one of those mastermind classes where you pay a lot of money and then you've got basically a mentor that will help you along the way. So just looking at that video, it looks kind of absurd. Like, why would you pay $18,000 for a guy to pull you down the hill? Right? That seems absurd. And let's see, do I have my comments that I made necessarily handy? So one of my mutuals was kind of like, what's going like, is this for real? Like, do men do this? And I said, Yeah, I think that's something that men might do, if they're looking for purpose in life. And now at the time when I made my comments, which weren't like I wasn't heavily critical, I was just kind of like, well, I can kind of understand it. I wasn't familiar with this modern day night program. So then I did a little bit of research and I looked it up just to see, and it's totally a legit thing. Like, and when I say legit, I mean it's like a real thing. Like this isn't some video that somebody's doctored up on the internet. This isn't something that was taken out of context necessarily. Now there's a lack of context, but it's not really taken out of context, right? It's not like they're trying to make it. People are looking at it and they're like, all right, why would you do this? It seems absurd. And I think in the broader, I think it's more understandable if you get if you kind of go and look at what they're trying to accomplish. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think that men should do this. We're just right now trying to understand what this is and why somebody might participate. And I think after we do those two things, we can have a better conversation about men, and then we'll try. I'm going to do my best to tie that in to reparations. So we'll see if I'm successful in this episode doing that. So let's go to their website. Let me pull that up real quick here, and then so here's the MKD. Let's do it this way. All right. So the MD, I want to say, I keep wanting to say MKD, but it's MDK project. So it stands for the modern day night. So let me pull that up on the screen for you. All right. Perfect. And let's do it that way. All right. So this is the modern day night. So it says it's only for entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders. So they're kind of limited. So apparently, now I don't know if that means like you have to be an entrepreneur or you have to be an executive or you have to be a leader. I'm not sure if when they say this is only for this, like they check your background and say, nope, you're not included. I don't know. They say your family deserves the best version of you as a leader, husband, and father. So right away, you could probably go, oh my gosh, is this one of those, one of those anti-woman things where, men are gathering together and they're trying to fight back against feminism in a very negative way? I don't think so. So, best way to figure out what's going on here is to hear it from themselves. So, we're gonna watch this video. I don't think I'm gonna play the whole thing because we got a lot of videos today, and I'm trying not to make this episode just a bunch of videos that I'm playing. But I think they're important to understanding the message and having this conversation. So, I'm gonna go ahead and play this video, and then we're going to hear from them, from these guys who run the organization, what they're attempting to achieve. Why would they invite men out to, and I believe they call their compound, if you will. I shouldn't say that word, but I believe they call their facility that where they host this event, the project, I think is what they call it. So let's play that real quick.
Gentlemen, welcome to the project. The project is a 75-hour experience. It's for men just like you who know that you're meant for more, who know that you might have areas in your life that you're not performing at your highest level. You know you've got greater potential, and there's a higher purpose for you here. The project is not an experience. It's also a process. It's like administering chemotherapy to a cancerous area of the body, and it's going to unearth and expose who you are. The physical challenging that you go through is purpose-driven. Every single evolution is purpose-driven. Every single evolution creates opportunity for four things: to lead, to show emotional discipline, to communicate, and to problem solve. So the project is here for a purpose, to help you become the man you know in your deepest heart that you're meant to be. And all we're going to do as instructors over the next 75 hours is administer the project. No different than a doctor would administer chemotherapy to a cancerous body part. You have to be able to control your emotions, because the moment you shut down and you let those thoughts come in and the self-talk begins, and the self-talk is never, yay, you got this. What did you do? Why did you sign up for this? This is harder than you think. So I want you to understand that if you're looking to the 75th hour, you've already failed. You know that after some amount of talking here, we're going to take you either out that door or out that door, and there's going to be some level of punishment, some level of suffering, some level of adversity. And I'm here to tell you right now, From the fittest to the fattest of you, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. So you have the choice to ring the bell and quit anytime you want. You need to understand the difference between being hurt and injured. You need to control the negative thought patterns up here. You need to go to the next hour, and that's all you need to worry about. Who's heard the phrase, blood is thicker than water? Raise your hand. All of you. That is taken out of context. The true phrase of that is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. What that means is the blood that people spill together, who go through adversity together, is thicker, creates a bigger bond, a deeper bond than the water of the womb, meaning people who have shared the same womb. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And to that point, this is where I like to remind you that there's only two things that you can control. Only two things, fellas, that you guys can control during this entire evolution. The amount of effort you put out and the attitude in which you show up with to every evolution.
All right, so we'll stop it there. We don't need to watch the whole thing, but I think you get the gist of it now, what they're accomplishing or what they're trying to accomplish. They're bringing men in and they're going to put them through a very challenging time. And then the expectation is that after that time, they will come out as a different purpose with a different understanding of who they are, what they can accomplish, so on and so forth. Now, you may have guessed by watching that video, like, wow, some of that looks like videos that I've seen from like like watching documentaries on the Navy SEALs or, some other special forces. And you would be right. They are like most of the men, if you look at their bios, most of them have been in some like, the SEALs or Marine Force Recon, stuff like that. So these are military members. And what's interesting is, my understanding, and I never participated in any special forces whatsoever, but my understanding is that a lot of time, like somebody once told me, and I believe he went to SEAL training. He said, look, the guys that are there that you think are the most brawny, the guys that just have the physical stamina for it, he said sometimes those are the guys that wash out first. He said the guys that get through are the guys that can that mentally get through. Is really more about mental. I mean, there is a physical element, of course, but when you look at a guy, he said like some of the smaller guys were some of the guys that he saw that were going the furthest. Now he did. Now at the time he told me that I don't think he had finished, or maybe he did. I can't remember exactly. It's been over a decade ago, and I don't remember all those conversations so well. But basically, the gist that I walked away from that conversation was that you've got to have the physical, but you've also got to have the mental um, wherewithal to go through special forces training. So you just because you're physically and fit and maybe you can physically do it is not going to be enough. That will not be enough to get you through. And so that is the nature of some of these activities, and you can see them. And so that kind of appears to be what's going on in that initial video where where the guys are climbing up, a hill, and they're all in the dirt and they're super dirty, and the guys are pulling them down by the leg, and they're like, "Hey, if you stop moving, I'm going to pull you down a little further." Right. And there's just like this mentality of like, I must keep moving. Okay. Now, the question here is this even necessary? Like, should men be doing this? Well, here's what I initially said. Now, I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but one of my mutuals said something like, hey, is this totally stupid? Like, I don't, I'm told I don't understand because I'm a woman. And so what I responded, I said yes and no. As others said, men need adversity and challenges. But as somebody else commented, brothers or friends growing up. And I said, in my opinion, such experiences are for early life. And then as a man, one seeks challenges on their own or with peers, but not someone to direct their challenge. And I said, think of it this way. As a young man, an adult sets the challenges for you, along with the criteria for success. This might be going to the military, getting higher education, any place where you're going as a young person to say, train me. I'm subjecting myself to your authority. you throw things at me, and then you set the criteria for success. So therefore, um, and then I will try to achieve it. And then I went on and I said, as a man, you seek out your own and set your own criteria for success, such as rock climbing, hiking, triathlon, etc. So those kind of things. And so my point being that in my when I was 19, for example, I joined the military, and there were times where I did feel like, in basic training, where I was like, man, like, what am I like? Do I need this? Like, they would ask you, they would say, do you even want to be here? And in my mind, I was like, do I? And and so and I can understand where he's coming from, because he said, if you're looking for the 75th hour, you've already lost. And looking back at my basic training, there were moments where you were like, okay, you start to realize you can't focus on getting to the end of basic training. You've got to focus on getting to whatever it is that I'm at now. Right. So if like we went on a very long march at one point. And so all you could focus on was, okay, take the next step, get up this hill, right? Like that's it. That's all you're going to focus on. You can't focus on, oh man, I can't wait till I get done with basic training, because at that time and moment, you have a specific goal that you absolutely must get to. You had to keep moving. You had to put one foot in front of the other in order to keep going, right? But again, this is something where I subjected myself to somebody else's authority, and it was they had defined the criteria. DL, when you get to this point, then made this accomplishment, right? And so then, after I left and I got older, then I got into things and I started defining my own achievements, uh, my own challenges and my own criteria for success from those challenges. For instance, cycling. I love cycling. And when I was a kid, I would just cycle a lot, just as a normal kid, right? I would just go around, I would just bicycle everywhere. I didn't really think much of it. And then I got older and I was like, all right, well, what ended up happening was when I moved down to Jacksonville to marry my now wife, I brought my bicycle, and because I had quit my job, I had no vehicle because I initially had a company vehicle. And then I only needed the one vehicle, so that's what I had. And so I brought down my bicycle, and I decided I was going to switch careers, and I would study web development. Now, this was in my mid 30s. Most people in their mid 30s do not quit their job to marry a woman and then say, I'm going to spend this next year studying so I can switch my career entirely. And not only studying on their own, right? So I didn't go to a school, because for me, that's not who I am. I am not the kind of person that's going to pay a lot of money to go to a school and learn. I'm more the kind of person that wants to just lay it all out myself and direct it, define my success, and then go make it happen. So I'm very, very self-directed. Okay. So that's what I did. Right. And then to get back to cycling, because I only had my bicycle while my wife was at work, I would cycle to where I needed to go. Initially, at the time, we lived about a mile from the grocery store. So I would cycle to the grocery store and buy groceries and come home, right? I might cycle to the library. I might cycle to some other place, so I would cycle like a couple of miles here and there. And then eventually I started deciding, you know what? I kind of like this. I really enjoy cycling. So then I started entering into events, and I had entered into events previously, one or two. And so my wife at the time was working for a company, and they had a cycling team that would cycle in the MS 150. So it's 150 miles in 2 days. And so what we would do is we would cycle from here in Jacksonville basically down to Daytona and back over a Saturday and Sunday. And that would be this event to raise money for MS. And in order to be in that event, you had to raise a certain amount of money, and then you could participate. So I would raise the money, and then I would cycle. And I started cycling more and more so I could prepare myself for this event. And the first couple of times it was kind of tough. The fact the first time it was extremely tough for me because by the time the race came and I was cycling 150 miles, I had actually only ever cycled 35 miles. I think it was 35 miles. That was the most I'd ever cycled up until that point. And so I went from, hey, I did 35 miles once to I'm ready to cycle 150 miles over 2 days. And it was rough. And then a long friend, a long time friend that I had told me, hey, my husband and I are also into cycling now. You should come to an event. So they said, we're also, since we're motorcyclists, we like going out to the tail of the dragon up there in North Carolina. And it's like 318 curves and like 11 miles. Motorcyclists love going out there, and it's actually quite neat, and it's very nice because there's a lot of mountains and all that stuff. And she said there is an event called the Cherahalla Challenge, and there's multiple paths that you can take, but the two main ones where you basically go up a mountain and you come back down, and that was I believe that was like a 64-mile route, and then the big route was 115 miles. And you do this in one day. So you pick one of the routes that you want to do. You do this in one day. And I went from 35 miles one time to saying I'm going to cycle now 150 miles in 2 days, which I did. And then we stepped it up and I said, all right, now I'm going to try this 64 miles, which is less than 150, but it's up in the mountains because Florida is flat. Okay. Cycling up a mountain and cycling here in Florida, let me tell you, completely different. Completely. Absolutely not the same whatsoever. So we go out and it took us about 7 hours to cycle up the mountain and back down. And we did that 2 years in a row. And then we decided, you know what? We want to take on the 115 mile route. So now we're trying to do 115 miles in one day up and down mountains. Okay. um, and every time that I went out to do the Cherahalla Challenge, all three times, it was brutal. It was absolutely a brutal effort. So bringing that back, I totally get it. I totally get men wanting to challenge themselves, men wanting to feel like there's more to it. Okay. I don't think this is out of the ordinary. This is why I said, like, yes and no. Men need adversity and challenges, and women may need it too. But I tend to speak more toward men because, well, I'm a man and that's what I know. So I'm going to speak to what I know, my experiences, my observations, which I can speak confidently on. And so men need adversity and challenges. But my belief is that what happens is when you're younger, other people identify those challenges for you to a degree. I mean, you might accept them and say, "I want to try that," but they're creating all the criteria. They're creating the whole routine that you're going to go through. Whereas once you start accomplishing those, then the next level is to identify what you want to do and go and seek it, and then identify what the challenge, what the criteria for success will be. So I didn't have somebody that would say, "Okay, DL, you're going to cycle this and this ride in 2 days, and you're going to go 150 miles." I said that from the very beginning. I said, "Oh, look, here's an event. I think I can do it. I'm going to go and train and get ready for it." So I had to do all the studying, all the training. I had to make myself get up. Like there was nobody that was going to pull me back down the mountain. I had to do it myself. I had to get up and get out there and get my butt in the saddle and then cycle. And there was just, and then since I live in Florida and I knew that I was going to be going up and down mountains when I went and did the Cherahalla Challenge, I had to be the one to say, how am I going to train or an event in the mountains when I live in Florida? So I had to go to like bridges. And there's a particular bridge near my house where I literally could just do loops. And I would literally just go up the bridge and down the bridge, up the bridge, down the bridge. And I would basically do a loop. And I just continuously did that for several hours, right? Like I had to make myself do that. There was nobody there, right? So this is to me the proper progression for a man. But I think we've kind of lost that in society. Now, does it always have to be physical? No. With men, I think it frequently is physical, but I don't think it has to be physical. Now, now that I've kind of explained this notion of like, okay, is this even realistic for men to want to go to? Um, let's talk a little bit more about like finding purpose. And I want to play this video. And this video is about 10 minutes long. So I do apologize. So, and I watched it again and I was like, and I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. It's an old video. It's probably about 15 years old, something like that. And it just really encapsulates the human spirit. So now this actually is not focused on men. And we'll talk about, and I might stop it throughout the video. But what this does is it talks about like it identifies autonomy, mastery, and purpose as three things that are necessary. And they talk about them in the context of business. And so I'll probably stop periodically and just, make some points along the way. But let's go ahead and play that clip. And you know what? It looks like I don't have it queued up because I'm, just a bad person, I guess. All right. So, and bring that over here and we will, there we go. How about that? There we go. All right. Not this one. Let's play this clip. It's 10 minutes and 47 seconds.
Our motivations are unbelievably interesting. I mean, I find I've been working on this for a few years, and I just find the topic still so amazingly engaging and interesting. So I want to tell you about that. The science is really surprising. The science is a little bit freaky. Okay, we are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think. There's a whole set of unbelievably interesting studies. I want to give you two that call into question this idea that if you reward something, you get more of the behavior you want. If you punish something, you get less of it. So let's go from London to the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the northeastern part of the United States. And let's talk about a study done at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's what they did. They took a whole group of students and they gave them a set of challenges. Things like memorizing strings of digits, solving word puzzles, other kinds of spatial puzzles, even physical tasks like throwing a ball through a hoop. Okay, they gave them these challenges and they said to incentivize their performance, they gave them 3 levels of rewards. Okay, so if you did pretty well, you got a small monetary reward. If you did medium well, you got a medium monetary reward. And if you did really well, if you were one of the top performers, you got a large cash prize. Okay, we've seen this movie before. This is essentially a typical motivation scheme within organizations, right? We reward the very top performers. We ignore the low performers and the other folks kind of in the middle. Okay, you get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test. They have these incentives. Here's what they found out. 1, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better their performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now, this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance. How can that possibly be? Now, what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, 2 at MIT, 1 at the University of Chicago, 1 at Carnegie Mellon, okay, the top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better their performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around, which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? It's kind of this kind of weird socialist conspiracy. For those of you who have those conspiracy theories, I want to point out the notoriously left-wing socialist group that financed the research, the Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the mainstream of the mainstream coming to a conclusion that's quite surprising, seems to defy the laws of behavioral physics. So this is strange, a strange finding. So what do? They say, this is freaky. Let's go test it somewhere else. Maybe.
Okay, so I want to stop here and just point out the Federal Reserve, libertarians tend to oppose. When I say tend, I mean like we oppose the Federal Reserve. And I don't know in the hands of them the idea of them understanding how people work and can be motivated is necessarily a good thing. But that's a conversation for another day. But I just wanted to make that really quick because I know they pointed out this, I'm a libertarian and I get some people that watch the show and I want to make sure that it's clear that, you know, I don't necessarily agree. Like we can agree on the findings. It doesn't necessarily mean that we agree that, hey, you should be the one that has anything to do with this. That's an entirely different topic though.
That $50 or $60 prize isn't sufficiently motivating for an MIT student, right? So let's go to a place where $50 is actually more significant relatively, right? So let's take the experiment. We're going to go to Madurai, India, rural India, where $50, $60, whatever the number was, is actually a significant sum of money. So they replicated the experiment in India roughly as follows. Small rewards, the equivalent of 2 weeks' salary. Small performance, low performance, 2 weeks' salary, medium performance, about a month's salary, high performance, about 2 months' salary. Okay, so those are real good incentives. Okay, so you're going to get a different result here. Well, what happened though was that the people offered the medium reward did no better than the people offered the small reward. But this time around, the people offered the top reward. They did worst of all. Higher incentives led to worse performance. What's interesting about this is that it actually isn't all that anomalous. This has been replicated over and over and over again by psychologists, by some extent by sociologists, and by economists, over and over and over again. For simple, straightforward tasks, those kinds of incentives, if you do this, then you get that, they're great. For tasks that are algorithmic, set of rules where you have to just follow along and get a right answer, if then rewards, carrots and sticks, outstanding. But when the task gets more complicated, when it requires some conceptual creative thinking, those kinds of motivators demonstrably don't work.
All right, so let's pause this here for just a moment because when we're talking about, so they're talking about in the workplace. That's what they're focusing on. They're saying, hey, when the task is something like, hey, you carry these bricks from here to there, then it's a straightforward. You get great results when you say we're going to give you more money if you work faster because it's physically, it's a physical job, but it's also one that doesn't require much creativity, much thought process to it necessarily. It's just one that people can kind of rudimentary do, as he points out. Then as the task get a little bit more creative, when you have to put more thinking into it, all of a sudden, then these rewards don't really work because people need something else that motivates them. Now, think about what the video that we saw a few moments ago, where they're talking about like, hey, business leaders, entrepreneurs, so on and so forth. Those are the kind of people that we're catering to. We're bringing men in to um, to transform them so that their business life, their family life, their life in general will feel like it has more purpose. Like they feel like they're getting the maximum out of life. So if you think about it in that context, then all of a sudden you realize that both of these elements are necessary. You do have some elements in life where it is a simple, hey, this is a task that has to get done, right? Like I said with my cycling event, it was a task that had to get done to get up and go out and cycle on a regular basis. Without doing that, I'm not going to get to the point where I can even attempt cycling up and down a mountain for 100 miles. I'm simply not going to be able to do that. On the other hand, some of those same tasks, even such as cycling, do require some creativity, some thought process. Okay, how am I going to, what's my nutrition going to be like? How do I do this? There are problems to solve that aren't solved just by physically doing something. I have to sit down and I have to create a solution. You know, maybe the solution is, okay, I've got a busy work day. How am I going to fit in cycling? And I have to sit down, look at my calendar, plan things out, figure out when I'm going to do certain things, and then make that happen. So when you're watching this video and we're thinking about this modern day night, the modern day night, I believe, is addressing both of these. It's addressing the issue of you have some tasks that you have to do that are very rudimentary. They're very boring. You might have to take out the trash. You might have to, go out and clean up the garage. You may have to go out and mow the lawn. These are very simple tasks. And in those contexts, those type of tasks can be easily rewarded with just a bunch of money. But then other tasks, trying to figure out, balance the family budget, solve a problem at work, all these different things, anything that you're figuring out. Those are the kind of things where just a simple monetary reward will not be as sufficient. So I just wanted to point that out, that this video is explicitly about people in the workplace, but we're kind of panning back and we're looking a little bit more broadly than that.
Fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of this, of almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian, an Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that one day of pure undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you can do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that had never emerged.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our...
So he said, go back for just a second here real quick. So like, you can see it right up on the screen there. He says, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me get out of your way. That's going to be important in a little bit. So kind of just put that in the back of your mind. Hold on to that for just a moment. Play.
One day of autonomy produces things that had never emerged. Okay, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You got all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it? Because it's fun, because you get better at it, and that's satisfying. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling. I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at you somewhat skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. I mean, she truly would have thought I was insane. Okay, it seemed to fly in the face of so many things. But what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of whom are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs? Okay, they have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing sophisticated technological work, and yet during their limited discretionary time, They do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who look into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call the purpose motive, is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose, partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good stuff, like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, it's just, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that, that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway here is that if we start treating people like people and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better smelling horses, if we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off. But I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
All right. So sorry about that long video, but I think it was absolutely valuable in watching. So you get that point, like, we make the world a better place. And one of the things I'll point out, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we're getting close to time and I got a couple of other things that I do want to get through. But free market, an absolute proper free market, I believe, provides those very things, right? And it makes sure that, as he pointed out, that the profit incentive is not unmoored from the what did he call it? The purpose incentive, right? Like you have, because the free market is a brutal place. The free market, if I'm a business owner and I decide that something is, that money is my motivator, then somebody else can come along and they can compete and they can say, well, money's not my motivator. Something else is my motivator. And because something else is their motivator, they're going to treat customers differently. Remember the video, or I'm sorry, in the video, he shows that, they're kind of like, hey, screw you, bozo. I don't like your service, right? That's what happens when it's all about making money. And I think the same thing can apply to the lives of men. If men start to feel like their whole life is about making money, I just go to work so I can make money, so I can come home and then I can pay bills and then go to sleep and wake up, go to work, get money, come home, pay bills. That is not a satisfactory life. That is not one that they want to live. So the idea that a man would want to join an organization and say, hey, look, I would like to become a modern day knight. I would like to challenge myself. I would like to know just what I'm really capable of. That's him saying there's more to life than making money. And I'm sure that some of these guys are probably have probably made a lot of money. I assume if you're paying $18,000 for this particular challenge. Now, let's move on to something else because I need to tie this into reparations. And how in the world am I going to pull that off? So let's see if I can do that. Now, the next clip is a short clip. This next clip comes from Cat Williams. He's a comic, he's a comedian, and I think he's a hilarious comedian. I love watching his comedy. He said something in this. I don't know where this clip comes. I don't know what video this comes from, but it comes from some stand-up comedy or something. And I found it very interesting, and I think there's a conversation to be had. So let's see what we can come up with. Let's see what we find. So I'm going to pull this up real quick. All right. And let's see there. There we are. And I will apologize ahead of time. There is some profanity. He is a profane comic, a hilarious one, don't get me wrong, but he is profane. I normally try not to use or have any profanity on this show. So if you've got little kids watching or listening, might want to cover their ears or skip past it or what have you. So, but I'm giving you that warning now. So let me add this. Uh, there we go. And then let's go ahead and hear what he says. It's about 1 minute clip.
White people, it's now time for Black people to get paid reparations for everything that Black people have been through in this country. Let's pay those reparations. Look at white people. What? Okay, white people, I know you're wondering, why now? Why, Cap? Why now? Why? Why? Well, here's the thing, white people, and I'm being honest with you. As Black people, we've never said this in history, but it's time for us to get reparations. Black people, it's our money, and when do we need it? You see that, white people? We didn't even rehearse that. That's how badly Black people need this money. Like every one of us needs this.
All right, here it
and
is.
White people, you need it too.
Here it goes.
You need it too. Aren't you ready to get this racism shit past us? Like no white person in here has ever had a slave a day in your life. Don't you want to get this the fuck off of you? Pay those motherfucking reparations.
All right. So, again, apologize for the profanity. It's the way it goes sometimes. But he points out at the very end, he says, hey, this is good for white people. Don't you want this too? And my instinct when I hear that is to say, that actually is not going to work out how you think it will. Here's what will happen if we're talking about just blacks and whites. You'll get reparations. If that were to happen, you would get reparations. And these systems that are in place, the same systems that are causing the Black community problem and many other communities for that matter, the same systems that are in place will still be in place. You will just have gotten a fat check. And because of that, your situation will not change, right? Because you can't say simultaneously that, well, we just need reparations and things will be better in some way. And then also say, but these systems that are in place are causing us problems. It's either one or the other. It can't be both, not in this particular case. And the reason it can't be both is because either the system is causing you a problem or the fact that there was money that was not provided, the reparations were not provided a long time ago. And, you know, in the idea that giving them now will compensate for the systems that are in place. No, it won't compensate for the systems because the systems will still be there, right? So you have to deal with the systems. You cannot just take a check. But here's the really important part, and this is where I'm going to try to tie this in. What will end up happening is that when these systems fail you yet again, I'm speaking to the Black community, when they fail you again, because they will, because they're still in place, what will happen if you've been given money from all the white people will look and say, well, we gave you money. What did you do with it? Why didn't you make something of yourself? Now, how do we tie that into what we've been talking about? I want to read something to you. I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but I am going to read it. This comes from the book Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. So let's see, where do we go here? I had it. Oh, here it is. There we go. All right. So I'm going to read this to you. And this is out of chapter 10, and it's titled A Harder Task Than Making Bricks. So here's what he said. Here's what Mr. Washington says. I had always sympathized with the children of Israel in their task of making bricks without straw. But ours was the task of making bricks with no money and no experience. You seeing where I'm going here? In the first place, the work was hard and dirty, and it was difficult to get the students to help. When it came to brick making, their distaste for manual labor in connection with book education became especially manifest. It was not a pleasant task for one to stand in the mud pit for hours with the mud up to his knees. More than one man became disgusted and left the school. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a moment and kind of give you a little bit of background. Booker T. Washington, when he opened up schools for Black people, he said, "Look, you can come to this school, but you have to put in the work. And if you don't put in the work, you can't be here." Okay, so that's kind of what's going on. You've got people that are like, "Look, you know what? Maybe school isn't so important. Maybe I don't want to do this kind of work." Okay, fine. No judgment. We're just laying the background of what happened. So continuing on. We tried several locations before we opened up a pit that furnished opened up a pit that furnished brick clay. I had always supposed that brick making was very simple, but I soon found out by bitter experience that it required special skill and knowledge, particularly in the burning of the bricks. After a good deal of effort, we molded about 25,000 bricks and put them into a kiln to be burned. That this kiln turned out to be a failure because it was not properly constructed or properly burned. We began at once, however, on a second kiln. This, for some reason, also proved a failure. The failure of this kiln made it still more difficult to get the students to take part in the work. Several of the teachers, however, who had been trained in the industries at Hampton, volunteered their services, and in some way, we succeeded in getting a third kiln ready for burning. The burning of a kiln required about a week. For the latter part of the week, when it seemed as if we were going to have a good many thousand bricks in a few hours, in the middle of the night, the kiln fell. For the third time, we had failed. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Pause for a moment. I want you to kind of start imagining. On one hand, you've got um, you've got a number of Black folk who are trying to build a school so that they can become educated because that's their only option. There is no other option here. It's either you do it or you don't get it. Then kind of start imagining, you don't have to try to merge them, just imagine simultaneously that first video of those men climbing up a hill and being pulled back down. So, third time failure for the kiln. These men are getting tired. They're exhausted. I mean, we could see it in the video. They were exhausted and and somebody's pulling them down from the work that they had crawled up a hill and then they get pulled back down in the dirt. Okay. Just hold on to that thought for a moment. All right. So let's continue on reading. We're almost done. The failure of this last kiln left me without a single dollar with which to make another experiment. Most of the teachers advised the abandoning of the effort to make bricks. In the midst of my troubles, I thought of a watch which had come into my possession years before. I took the watch to the city of Montgomery, which was not far distant, and placed it in a pawn shop. I secured cash upon it to the amount of $15, with which to renew the brick-making experience. I returned to Tuskegee and, with the help of the $15, rallied or rather demoralized and discouraged forces and began a fourth attempt to make bricks. This time, I'm glad to say, we were successful. Before I got hold of any money, the time limit on my watch had expired, and I've never seen it since. But I've never regretted the loss of it. Brickmaking has now become such an important industry at the school that last season our students manufactured 1,200,000 of first class bricks. 1,200,000 of a quality stable to be sold in any market. Aside from this, scores of young men have mastered the brick-making trade, both the making of bricks by hand and by machinery, and are now engaged in this industry in many parts of the South. The making of these bricks taught me an important lesson in regard to the relations of the two races in the South. Okay, now this is Booker T. Washington. His book was written in like the early 1900s. Many white people who had had no contact with the school and perhaps no sympathy with it came to us to buy bricks because they found out that ours were good bricks. They discovered that we were supplying a real want in the community. The making of these bricks caused many of the white residents of the neighborhood to begin to feel that the education of the Negro was not making him worthless, but that in educating our students, we were adding something to the wealth and comfort of the community. As the people of the neighborhood came to us to buy bricks, we got acquainted with them. They traded with us and we with them. Our business interest became intermingled. We had something which they wanted, they had something which we wanted. This, in a large measure, helped to lay the foundations for the pleasant relations that have continued to exist between us and the white people in that section and which now extend throughout the South. So, this is Booker T. Washington describing this experience where the young men came. They really want, and there were women too, but the the black community showed up and said, "We want education." But in order to get the education, they had to first get past the fact that they had no building. And in order to get past the building, the lack of a building, because they had no money, they had to build the building themselves. But in order to build the building, they had to build a kiln. And they failed 3 times. 3 times they failed. And then on the fourth, they finally got it right. And that took Mr. Washington selling a watch which he had been given that he really prized, sold it for $15 so that he could buy the necessary supplies to try a fourth time to build a kiln. To me, what that says is reparations aren't the answer. The answer is, as was pointed out in that very long video, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It's not always the pleasant way. The way that autonomy, mastery, and purpose comes about is not always in a pleasant way. I would never suggest that the Black community ever have to go through that again. What I would suggest is that we need a more free market. We need an environment that is more conducive to the autonomy, to the pursuit of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. This goes for the Black community, and this goes for men in general, whether you're white or Black or what have you. So to go and answer my friend who had once said, like, is this stupid? Yes and no. I think there are better ways to accomplish it, but we don't have a society that is allowing people to pursue autonomy, mastery, and purpose. We confine people in these little boxes, and in some cases, very tiny boxes. When it comes to the idea of reparations, giving money is not going to be enough because at the end of the day, you're still going to have the same situation for which got you into this particular place. The same the same set of circumstances that are contributing to where the Black community is now will still be present. Those things need to be removed. As a libertarian, we want to remove those kind of things. And many of them are laws and all these other things, right? These are limitations upon people. Some of these limitations may not even seem that they're specifically applied to the Black community because they're not. They're not necessarily intended. Some of them may be, but most of them probably are simply just rules that are put into place. And if you're already in a bad situation, these rules don't help you. These things are not of a value to you, and they will prevent you from pursuing autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And autonomy, mastery, and purpose is what those men and women at the school in Booker T. Washington's day received. They received the autonomy, the mastery, the purpose. They had a purpose. They weren't just building bricks because the boss told them to. I mean, kind of, sort of, but not really. Their purpose was, I want to become educated so that I can see where it is I can go in life. I think this also plays a role with men today. I think it's an entirely different situation, but I think that men today face social obstacles, and these obstacles are not conducive to pursuing autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Therefore, organizations like the Modern Day Night pop up and they say, hey, men will help you get there. And so these men, some of them who may be wealthy, money does not provide the the purpose in life. It does not. Money might help you get there. It certainly will. The $15 did help Mr. Washington purchase another kiln for which they could move forward. So money does help, but it quickly has a limit. And that limit cannot be compensated for by more money. You have to have the circumstances around you that allow you to pursue autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, I personally believe that when you're younger, you start out, and it doesn't matter whether you're a young man or a young woman, but it doesn't matter whether you're white or whether you're black. I believe that when you start out, what you end up doing is you fulfill somebody else's purpose. And it might be yours too. You might say, "Hey, I want to be in the military," right? And so then you go through basic training. But ultimately, you are mastering things that have been decided for you. You are learning things that someone else has decided that you need to learn in order to accomplish this. Then when you get older, you say, you know what? I want to do this entirely on my own. I want to climb Mount Everest. Now, you might go to people who have climbed Mount Everest before, and you might say, what kind of things do I need? But you are still following the path of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I believe that's what's missing in our society today. And it applies to men, it applies to given communities, minority communities, communities that are struggling. And I believe that there are different factors for which are creating those impediments for any of these groups. So that is my show today. I think I tied in reparations to the modern day night, and then hopefully I've described to you why, in simple, that the idea of just giving people money is insufficient because it doesn't lead to a fulfilled life. And it can never. It doesn't matter whether you're a group that has been denied, because what ended up happening early on, the Black community was denied. Well, one, they were denied everything because they were slaves, but then they were promised certain things and they were denied those things. But then again, we look at men, and there are many men who have things. They have money. They already have a good, what you might call a good life, but they still feel unfulfilled. That's because money cannot provide that. And look at that. Just in time to finish up the show. My little man has woken up. And so now it's time for me to go. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Then again, Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co host, Susan Hogarth. We're going to discuss what's going on in the world of the Libertarian Party, what they are doing in this vastness of tyranny in the US. And we believe it is tyranny, and what they are doing to bring more liberty. Because when they bring more liberty, they will bring more autonomy, more opportunities for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Be sure to do all the proper audience actions. Subscribe to my YouTube channel over at youtube.libertydad.com. You can also go over to rumble.libertydad.com where I'm streaming there now, and you can follow me. You can like the videos. And again, just like YouTube, you can comment. Follow me on social media, Liberty Dad on Facebook, Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, or email me, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com, because I would absolutely love to hear from you. And remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for today,